Hey, what's going on everyone, Vasco here and welcome back to the channel. And just a few days ago I made a video regarding porpoising and how it might be hurting drivers. And I know a lot of other content creators did the video as well, but it seems like our voices have been heard because the FIA has introduced a brand new technical directive that aims to limit the amount of porpoising that a car that's going to Grand Prix is allowed to have. So in this video we'll take a quick look at the brand new technical directive that the FIA has introduced, as well as which teams it will affect the most. Let's do this. Okay, so I've got here in my computer an article from Racing News 365. The FIA announces measures to reduce or eliminate porpoising in Formula 1. So basically, the FIA has talked to various doctors and various personnel around the Formula 1 teams, and they have come up with solutions to fix the porpoising issue. Okay, so I've got here a quick rundown of the ways in which the FIA is aiming to reduce the porpoising, and this includes the closer scrutiny of the planks and skids, both in terms of design and observed wear. So as you know, Formula 1 cars have a plank in the bottom of the car, a wooden plank, that's there to register just how much the car is hitting the ground, and in previous years it's used to determine the ride height of the car to assure that the car wouldn't go below the rated ride height, but now they can observe the wear and damage on the plank in order to assure that the car isn't hitting the ground too much. And secondly, the definition of a metric based on the car's vertical acceleration that will give a quantitative limit for the acceptable level of oscillations. So this may sound very complicated, but it's actually quite simple. So you can see here in this picture by Craig Scarborough that this is basically the inside of a cockpit of the car. You can see right around here is where the seat would go, so the seat would go right on top of this. You can see the seat belt right here, in fact. So basically anything placed here will feel the same things as the driver. So you can see that here you have the SDR, which is basically the box that registers every single data point from the car and then sends the telemetry to the FIA. And connected to it right beneath the driver there is an accelerometer. So this accelerometer can measure the vertical movement of the car, so how much the car goes up and down in each porpoising cycle, and then it will generate a graph such as the one I've shown in my previous video, which shows you the vertical g-force amplitude and the laps. So you can see in this graph right here, that is from the Spanish Grand Prix, which was the race that Mercedes had the least amount of porpoising, that Mercedes is right here on the bottom, so they have a very low vertical g-load, so they would be fine in this metric. But in this race you can see from this top line right here that Alpine had a lot of porpoising. So what would happen with this rule is that an artificial line would be set somewhere around here. So let's say that the line would be around 0.7G, 0.6G. So somewhere around here where the cars have some porpoising, but not enough to really disturb the drivers, because if you remember from Spain, you can see here the Ferrari line. You see that their porpoising is on average about 0.62G, somewhere around there. And the drivers weren't really complaining about anything. But if you remember from the Spanish Grand Prix, drivers from Alpine were really complaining about porpoising. Okay, and now let's take a look at the porpoising result from Azerbaijan, and as you can see the picture is very different. So this was a race that hit Mercedes very hard, and you can see that their porpoising, their violent porpoising that we saw around the race, went from about 0.67G to about 0.75G, and this was enough to really hurt Hamilton's back. So I'm expecting that the artificial limit that will be placed around porpoising will be around the 0.6G mark. So as you can see, this is a limit that's around the average, so around the average of what every single team is able to achieve right now, but a limit that doesn't allow the drivers to get hurt, because once you allow the porpoising to get above this 0.65G of amplitude, you are really putting the driver's health at risk. So I'm expecting the limit to be right around the 0.6G mark, which is a limit that I think most teams will be able to hit. But what will happen to them if they are not able to hit it? Well, for the teams that are not able to meet this criteria, the FIA will demand a raise of 10 mm in the ride height of the car, which will have significant impacts on the cars. So as you can imagine, these ground effect cars are very dependent on the car performing a very good seal with the floor of the car and the floor of the track. So the closer the car is to the ground, the more downforce it will generate. So if you mandate the car to be 10 mm or 1 cm further away from the track, this will limit the downforce amount very much. So just for context, this was about the same distance that the Mercedes was able to reduce when it came to Barcelona, and you saw what happened in Barcelona. So if you compare the results from the Mercedes pre-Barcelona to post-Barcelona, you can really see the difference that a 10mm change in ride height can cause. So you can expect that for any of the teams that are above this 0.6G limit, which I'm not saying it's the official limit, I think that the limit will be calculated on a race-by-race basis, but let's just assume 0.6G. So for the cars that are above the 0.6G limit, the FIA would mandate that the ride height would be increased, which would then generate less downforce from the floor and then eliminate the porpoising effectively, which was what Mercedes was doing. But this will incur in a massive loss of performance for that team. So if you take a look at the Azerbaijan example, if the FIA set the limit to 0.6G, most teams would be very much okay and within the limits. Many, such as Ferrari, you see here in the beginning of the race, and maybe Haas, would need to make a few setup tweaks in the beginning of the race, so that in this beginning phase of the race where the fuel tanks are pretty much full and where it's easier to get porpoising, because you can imagine that if porpoising is caused by higher levels of downforce, well, weight is kind of downforce in this scenario and it makes it easier for the porpoising phenomenon to set in. So in this example, both Haas and Ferrari would need to make a little bit of a setup tweak right here, but that's nothing that would compromise their performance too much. But you can see that Mercedes would definitely fall in the category that would need to raise their ride height for 10mm, and this would just ruin their race performance, because let's face it, the only reason that Mercedes was able to get that good result in Azerbaijan was at the cost of Hamilton's health, really, because he was bouncing all over the track and he got really hurt from the back at the end of the race. But the only reason that Mercedes was able to extract so much downforce from the car was because they were running it so close to the ground that on the corners it had all the grip, but then on the straights it had all the porpoising in the world. Now, something very interesting coming up from this rule that you can see right here is that if you compare this porpoising amplitude from Spain and from Azerbaijan, you can see something very interesting. And that is, in this race, Mercedes had the lowest amount of porpoising, but in this race they had the highest. So what this may mean is that we can expect to see some very severe fluctuations in performance over the next coming races because of this rule. So we can have a race such as Barcelona, where a team like Mercedes is pretty much unaffected, but where teams such as Alpine, Haas and Ferrari, as you can see right here, are affected. So we can expect that this rule will change the pecking order in a race-by-race basis, and I think that this rule can be a very good short-term solution for the porpoising problem, but I think that in the long term and for 2023 and 2024, we will need an update to the regulations that really fixes the porpoising problem from the ground level and that allows cars to run with the optimum setup, because otherwise you will just see massive fluctuations in performance based on your porpoising level around the track. So if you imagine in Azerbaijan, Mercedes would be hit with this porpoising rule and their performance would drop dramatically, but then in Spain their porpoising was the lowest, so they wouldn't be hit with this rule, but Alpine, Ferrari and Haas would. And you can expect this rule to really mix things up in the races, because according to which teams are hit by the rule, you can expect that the pecking order will change a lot, with one major exception. So the only team that seems to have porpoising under control is Red Bull Racing. They seem to be able to set the car to just wherever they want it and the porpoising phenomenon doesn't kick in. So you can see right here from the Red Bull, the blue line, that they are among the lowest porpoising cars throughout the entirety of the race here in Spain. But then when we come to Azerbaijan, a completely different racetrack, you can see that Red Bull is also among the lowest. So they have a car that's not going to be really affected by this rule, even if they have to compromise their setup a little bit. You can see that their main rivals in Ferrari and Mercedes are in much more trouble if this porpoising rule is to kick in, because Red Bull is not only not feeling the effects of porpoising in reliability and in their driving styles, but now they will not only have that advantage, but they will also have an advantage when it comes to the setup and to this rule. So this rule that's expected to be introduced from Montreal onwards has a really big potential to shake things up in the Constructors and Drivers' Championship and to change the pecking order. So for now, I think that's pretty much it on this brand new rule that's been introduced. And again, I think that it's a very good short-term fix, but I think that in the long term, the rules need to be changed in order for all of the cars not to be allowed to porpoise, but to be able to extract the maximum performance. But for now, I'm just happy that the drivers will be protected from this point onwards, and that we should stop seeing the cars just going up and down the track, because after all, Formula 1 is the biggest engineering competition in the world, and it really makes the Formula 1 teams look unprofessional to have their cars just bouncing up and down the straight and seeing drivers get hurt just to extract the maximum performance of the car. We have never seen this for the last few decades in Formula 1, and it shouldn't be a feature that comes back to the sport. The cars really should be stable and performing at their best without any of these weird quirks happening. So that's my take on the new rules, and just a quick video to announce what's going to happen from Montreal onwards. And you can let me know what you think about this regulation change in the comments down below, and what effects do you think it will have on the Montreal Grand Prix. So for now, that's been it for this video. I really hope you guys enjoyed, and if you guys want to see why this regulation was introduced, you can check out my latest video right here. And if you enjoyed, please don't forget to like and subscribe. So once again, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next week. Goodbye!